fuel choice that even rivals can agree on? Now that's worth the hype. Cheaper, cleaner, and homegrown. Pump it up with unleaded 88. Jason Aldean, Full Throttle Tour 2025, powered by Patriot Mobile. When the lights come on. Friday, September 19th, Wells Fargo Arena. With Nate Smith. You set my world on fire. And Ray Lynn. Jason Aldean. On sale now at iowaeventcenter.com. Jason Aldean Live. Scott Dochterman, Chad Leistikow, together on one pod, talking Hawks and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners, exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. We are live on this Thursday morning from the Channel Seed Studios for episode 83 of Legends and Listeners here on Iowa Everywhere. Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register here, Scott Dochterman of The Athletic there. Scott, we've switched places this week. I'm over in Indianapolis for the Big Ten women's tournament, where the Hawkeyes got their first win of the week, of many more, maybe. We'll see. And you're back in Iowa. I guess you got out of Ames. You were in Ames last night or 2 nights ago, right? And busted out of the snowstorm. You're back home.
Yeah. If the game didn't go into double overtime Tuesday night between BYU and Iowa State, I would have been able to get out. But then the blizzard started, and it was 50 to 60 mile an hour winds, and the snow was coming down. It was almost like coming up as opposed to down, and I made it as far as Dayton Avenue on Highway 30 and went, all right, I'm turning in my Midwestern man card here. I'm not going any further. It's kind of pointless. And then on my way back, I think I counted 11 cars in the ditch. And most of them were before Marshalltown. So it was, I made the right call, even though I feel like a loser for it.
Yeah, we, Dargan and I left Iowa Tuesday just to get out of the way. We stayed in Peoria on Tuesday night, so yeah, that's that time of year. You got to make it shouldn't be that time of year. I mean, it's March, but it's also the girls' state basketball tournament. Jeff Linder's safely in the hotel next door to the arena, so he's fine.
Yeah, exactly. But it seems like I know it doesn't happen every year, but it's always that thought that girls' state basketball tournament, you can get ready for a big snowstorm. So it wasn't that big. It was just kind of a nasty one for 10 hours or so. And unfortunately, that was the block that I was ready to get out. But I am safely now in North Liberty, just a couple blocks from my GameDay Men's Health Center, and excited to talk to you. Next week, we'll probably be flipping the same spots because I'll be in Indianapolis for the next tournament. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Good point. I grew up, running in the Drake Relays or whatever. And it was the same. The Drake Relays has the same reputation. It's going to be great in April until the Drake Relays week, and then it's going to suck. So, anyway, you know what, Scott? Let's start with, even though I'm over here with the women, and there's actually a fair bit of football news to talk about with the Hawkeyes, with a new hire aboard, another one coming soon. Let's talk some men's basketball because we're live here on this Thursday, and less than 12 hours from now, we could be seeing the last home game of the Fran McCaffery era. It's Iowa versus Michigan State. I assume you're going to be there, right? And the Hawkeyes may not make the Big Ten tournament at this point. We talked about that last week. It doesn't look great this week, but Fran made some comments this week. I guess it's probably the first time he's sort of been publicly addressed it. It reflected kind of what I had in my article about a month ago now, or whatever it's been. He's that I'm not going anywhere, like the Leonardo DiCaprio, scene or whatever, right? So what do you make of kind of the situation leading into tonight? There's some mystery here, but at least not from Fran's end.
Yeah, I listened to what he had to say. I watched it a couple of times because I wanted to read body language as much as the words, because sometimes it's hard if you just read the words, you don't know how he's saying it. And what he told and what Tyler had reported was, "I'm fully committed to the program, to the players. I have no intention of moving on. I just came to work today, try to figure out how we can beat Michigan State." And I guess if you take it at face value first, that's exactly what he should be saying. He's still in the middle of the season, or not in the middle of the season, but he still has games to play. Thursday night, tonight against Michigan State, and then also on Sunday, which actually is a game winning in and losing out when it comes to the Big Ten tournament, because you'll sweep Nebraska if you win over there, and you get to the Big Ten tournament. But it is something that obviously we've all discussed for months now. I know he knows it's out there, and but the way he addressed it was matter of fact. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't agitated. I think he understood it was coming, and he had the right response for it. But I think what it also does, Chad, and tell me what you think, is that he lays this entire decision at the feet of his athletic director, Beth Getz, who did not hire him. Gary Barta had his back throughout his entire career. Now it's in her hands, and she's going to have to be the one to make the decision. And I don't think that Fran will make this like, yeah, sure, I'll take X amount to walk away. It's going to be like, you mentioned Leonardo DiCaprio. I'm going to say Goodfellas, blank you, pay me. It's kind of the
yeah, and that kind of, there's a lot of money involved here. I mean, it's $4.2 million would be the buyout as of April 1st, as we reported, and it's not. First of all, I think he probably would like to be paid more. Let's say that, and so he's not going to say, "Okay, I'll just take $2 million." Let's shake hands, and I want to walk. Yeah. Even though he wants to keep coaching. Like that's, I think that's the, even I like didn't fall for it, but just sort of like felt that too. Like, oh, Jack's going to be at Butler next year, and Connor's coaching at Butler, and it would kind of make sense. We all thought that, but he's a basketball coach, and he wants to keep coaching. He'll be 66 in May. Heck, Kirk Ferentz is going to be 70 in August, and he's going. Why would Fran McCaffery walk away, especially when he can, potentially? Let's say Iowa buys him out, he'll get another job somewhere if he wants to. He'll turn around a program, and so I can just walk away from $2 million for, just to retire when he doesn't even want to retire. You know what I mean? Right. So like, get the money. Anyway, that part's been kind of silly, but you're right. There isn't going to be some happy, agreeable ending at this, between, or maybe there is if they stay together, I suppose, and they return to prominence. But yeah, it'll be interesting. We're still getting a feel for Beth Getz, but how quickly should she make a decision? How quickly will she make a decision? How quickly will it be made public? What do what's kind of your vibe on that?
That's a great question, because again, if they win on Sunday, then they're going to play on Wednesday in Indianapolis, and then their season could end right after that. They could have the potential to still be 500 or have a winning record. So there's that potential as well. So you got to throw all that into it. It's not the core decision. Whether they go to the Big Ten tournament or not, this is a bigger decision than that. I think in this case, though, she needs to have her decision ready to go. And ultimately now, if she wants to have a bigger, deeper conversation with Fran to let him say his piece one way or the other, then he deserves that too. Because we can look at this at multiple angles, and none of them are wrong. Fran, is an outstanding coach, no question about it. He is a very good basketball coach. He can coach the sport. He to do what he's done in Iowa has been very respectable. There are also disappointments, and there's a low ceiling, high floor situation. that he has gotten Iowa into a very competitive era throughout, and yet not been able to crash through because of his own schematics, his coaching, and some of those areas. That needs to be addressed. And then you look at some of the other situations, which would be, and this is probably the most important part, Chad, because if the stands were still pretty full, if they were typical, then I don't think this is a decision you make. Then I think you just say, go get them next year. Every coach has a struggling season, but you got to look at butts in the seats. You just have to. I mean, I started going back, Chad, to pre-1970 numbers, which aren't even available. I had to go through box scores from the Register and the Gazette to find what the attendance were for each individual year. And after about an hour and a half, I said, you know what, this is too much. But I got to the 1964, Chad, and they're still going, unless there's a sellout tonight, that I got all the way back there. This will be the lowest attended season on COVID since at least 1964. And that's just paid attendance. And let alone, you're talking about, fannies in the seats, which are right now you're talking about, 40% of the seats are unfilled. So that is a bigger deal to me than competitiveness on the floor, because not that any coach could be competitive on the floor, but you could find more coaches that are competitive on the floor and do a better job relating to the fan base.
Yeah, I mean, 67% of the seats are unfilled. I mean, it's 1/3 full of actual fans and seats, about 5,000 per game. So yeah,
right. And I meant it out of the fans who actually bought tickets. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. So it's that's the
so you're actually spending money and not going, choosing not to go. That's tough. I mean, you can't find people to take your tickets. That's tough.
Yeah. Timing wise, her decision, we're still getting to this is the first time she's had a high profile, head coach situation to deal with like this. And clearly it is something, it's not like we're making something out of this. Like there is a decision going on that they have to mull. And that's why I wrote about it in great length. I wouldn't have written about it if they weren't actually considering this. So I guess just knowing what I know about her and how she operates, I would think it would happen pretty quickly. I don't think there's going to be a twisting in the wind for weeks and that type of thing. That would be my guess. I don't know that for sure, but that would be my sense of what to do. I don't know, but I mean, if she decides to bring him back, I would think there would be same thing, like some kind of statement. We're doing this, that, whatever. So I don't know. I mean, I guess if I had to guess, I think there's probably going to be a change. But it is a business. I think that's the biggest and one of the many big factors. But I think it's the, do you let a branch of your business just keep suffering in terms of financials? If you can maybe make a change and fix it. I mean, a good CEO probably does make that change. Although you could argue Kirk Ferentz didn't make that change for many, many years with his offense. You know what I mean?
He deserves, and then we'll get into football.
Yeah, I know.
But that is an important part of this too, because anytime I start to say, well, Kirk has done this better than Fran when it comes to fan engagement, the nepotism situation is real and in that situation. And I think that's, it's true that when we see what's happened on offense, really in the last year and what's continuing to happen on offense, that really helped, held Iowa back. But I think when it comes to basketball, what if she decides to ride it out with Fran another year? I mean, then she needs to come out with a plan. Okay, this is how we fix it. And that's going to be the next, issue, which is, okay, you're bringing back Fran. You better do something to entice fans other than say, come out and support your Hawks, because fans have not chosen that route yet. So, and that's going to be Fran, you're going to have to put away your petty grievances with reporters, and there are a lot of them that he has petty grievances with, and you're going to have to start appearing on podcasts, and you're going to have to start appearing on radio shows, and you're going to have to start doing tours of the state, and you're going to have to be nice to people, and you're going to have to do that to tout this program. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Let's be honest, Chad. There's some of us, and I'm included, who have no relationship with Fran McCaffery, and you've got to be better than that. You've got to go on Hawk Central Radio, and you've got to you got to go on KGYM in Cedar Rapids. You've got to go and sit in front of KCRG and have and not tell them, no, I'm not talking to you because they accurately reported about what happened with your son. You've got to do that stuff. You can't just shun people anymore. And if he can't do that, then you've got to make a change, because the people have tapped out on this. And I'm sorry if I'm getting a little bit feisty on this, but to me, that's the two lines. Excellent coach, fans are not in there. You've got to encourage the fans to be interested. Otherwise, then you've got to just cut bait and move on.
Maybe Beth should use a points per game allowed clause in the contract. I'll Gary Martin. Allow
drive,
72 points or less next season in the Big Ten.
The drive
4% field goal percentage allowed.
Yeah. the drive for 655. You know, thanks per game.
Sorry, I just needed to bring a little humor to the situation, but I mean, it's. I would if he's gonna stay, I would, a mandate maybe is a strong word, but like, let's make an assistant coaching restructure where defense becomes a priority. You hire a defensive coordinator, so to speak. I've said this before, but like a Phil Parker type of the basketball program where you can actually defend and stay in games, and he's got a decent recruiting class signed, so that also complicates it. Going back to my article, like, whoever the next coach is, Beth also the biggest thing she has to fix is NIL. I mean, paying players, because Iowa's not going to have a good basketball program if you're trying to do it on the cheap. You just can't really do it in basketball. I mean, you can't do it in men's basketball or women's basketball. You've got to have players. So that's a part of it too, that he really, I would say he has something to do with it for sure. But it's also, people aren't donating to men's basketball. So
right. Well, and that gets back to the apathy and indifference that people have towards the program, and that's based on himself. I mean, let's face it. It's people have walked away not because of the play on the floor, because they're making tournaments. This year won't be one, but in the past that they've done that, and you've seen this deterioration of the fan base. So that's got to be part of it. Whether it's an extra emphasis on defense, restructuring the staff, doing something different other than nothing different, which is he's done it exactly the same way for 15 years. It's got to be done differently. Otherwise, you're looking at more of the same. And I understand, he's got a pretty good class coming in, and he's got some players there. I would also say, though, look across the state, Chad. During the COVID year, Iowa State was 2-22. They were 0-18, and you had to make that change. And then in 2 out of 3 years, TJ Otzelberger took them to the Sweet 16. Their NIL is not higher than Iowa's, and granted, it's a different league, but you're battling for the same types of recruits, and there's a different level, no question. But when it comes to payment and all of that, but it shows that the right person can still do it. And if you energize the fan base, then you can generate more money in that regard.
Yeah, and if she knows that, let's say, Darian DeVries would take the job, for example, I think you probably do in her shoes need to make a move. Because that's just talking to people, fans, that agree at the Iowa Ever, especially like DeVries would be somebody that people would be excited about. That's people would rally around that. And I had one. Jared DeVries is his brother. Yeah. His son has one more year of eligibility, minor factor, but still significant. Yeah. Probably a guy that you'd think you could probably keep in Iowa long term as long as you have some success. It's not like not like you're bringing in a quote unquote outsider type of thing. It's from Applington, Iowa. So Anyway, so that's also the stuff that we don't know that Beth does know. Like, hey, I could get this person right now.
Yeah.
But I've said this before, like, you can't just make a move and then say, okay, now we're going to go start hiring. Who can we get? And then it's like crickets, that want to come here because they don't have enough NIL, and then you don't have, and then you quote unquote settle. And then what did you do? You just, I think she will have a plan. I don't think she'll do that. I think she will have a plan if she makes a move. That's what I would say. Yeah.
And I covered both coaching searches for Gary Barta when Steve Alford got kind of nudged out the door and found a great landing spot for him in New Mexico. And then I covered the one when he let Todd Licklider go, and both of them were start from ground zero. And he made a couple of mistakes early, especially in the replacement for Steve Alford. One of them was reaching out to Bruce Pearl when he was at Tennessee, and then it became highly public. And then Bruce Pearl turned that into an extension at Tennessee, and so he kind of got egg on his face there. Then later on, he created two memos of understanding, one for Kevin Stallings, who was at Vanderbilt at the time, and one for Todd Licklider at Butler. And because both were created, they're both subject to public records laws, so they're both available. And Todd Licklider had the cheaper one. Kevin Stallings had 1.4 million. This is again 2007, and Todd had 1.2 million per year. And so you've already showed your coach that, I think less of you by $200,000 a year. Yeah. So, and of course he was worth less. He was worth less than $200,000 a year as a coach. So, but you're at a rosier place of operation here, Chad, in Indianapolis. My hotel room last week at the Combine was right across the street from Gainbridge. I sat up there and watched them put up all the signage and of all, it took them a lot longer than it used to with 18 teams and 18 things there. But I guess kind of to segue into this.
Yeah.
Last night, instead of kind of piddling around like they did against Wisconsin on Sunday for the first half, it seemed to be right out of the chute. They had that 19-0 run or something to close the first quarter. The women did, and then blew out Wisconsin, and smartly used all the freshmen for a ton of minutes in the second half to save the legs of their starters. What was your impression of that, and what did you kind of get with the surroundings too?
Yeah, the Hawkeyes beat Wisconsin 81-54. Interestingly, it's the biggest margin of victory against a Big Ten opponent all season long. That includes the rout at Washington. So you think about the fact that all the starters played 23 or fewer minutes in the game. Hannah Stolke only played 16. Sita Fulter only played 18. And then, Aaliyah Guyton, a freshman, led the team in minutes with 24. Taylor Stremolo played 23. Callie Levine, who hasn't scored or had an assist all year, is in the game in the third quarter and plays quite a bit. Played like 8 or 9 minutes, and she gets her first 2 assists of her career. I mean, all across the board, the 5 freshmen. Tegan Mullaney, she was 1 for 19 in 2025 from 3, and then Banks went in from 3 and had a real nice reverse layup as well. Also picked up 6 boards. And Ava Hayden just continues in her little glimpses to play really, really nice minutes. And so, just a beautiful scenario for the Iowa women because, they came here, Scott, with, they came here with the mindset of winning the tournament. They believe that they can make a run. And why not? They've won the last 3. This is their 10th straight Big Ten tournament win, Scott. I think that's a remarkable stat. And Caitlin Clark was courtside there in the fourth quarter. But I guess it underscores that this program has a real postseason mentality. They do it the right way. There's Lisa Bluter in this team. Where's the Bud Light? Where's the Bud Light? The iconic moment. For those that don't know, she was seen on TV drinking a Bud Light. So fans had fun with that. That's what this women's program under Bluter and now Jensen is really all about, is postseason success. And contrast that with the men. I was driving over here with Dargan, and we were talking about the men's team. So I was talking about past trips to conference tournaments. I was like, yeah, like when I covered the men, like a lot of times I packed for 3 or 4 days, and you're gone in one. I mean, think about, 14, 15, 16, 17, all one and done.
Yeah.
And 15, 16 were the most shocking, of those. So I don't know. I don't want to see you take it for granted, Scott, with the women, but they just turned it on last night, and they look like a team that wants to be here a while.
They are the greatest 11 seed in the history of conference tournaments. And there's just no other way about it. I mean, if you were to seed this by the eye test, or if you were to be a selection committee and decide, okay, how are we going to seed this? I would put them probably 5. I would put them behind Maryland and Ohio State.
I guess, but because they lost to both. But right now they're playing like 3.
But anywhere from 3 to 5. But I would not put them lower than 5 based on how they've played. They've won 9 out of the last 11. Those 2 losses came by a deuce to UCLA at home, who's a top 5 team, and then an overtime on the road at Ohio State. That to me, tells me they're that close to being 11-0. And then you go back before that, and you were on the game to Oregon, and then there was the Nebraska game, and they're so close in all these other matchups. And this team playing with a lot of confidence. They're playing well in stretches. And so they have every right to believe that they have a real shot in this. I mean, they beat USC, the Big Ten champion. They almost beat, they were within an open 3 look that didn't go from beating UCLA. They had a great comeback at Ohio State, which again is a program that that has turned into quite a rivalry, I think, in women's basketball over the years, and blew them out 2 years ago in the tournament and everything. I think that tonight they're playing Michigan State, a team that they probably look at and want to throw up when they look at that film and think we should have won that game. They were up by a lot and then fell apart. Then you're playing Ohio State. If you get past this one on Friday night, and same deal, it's like we went there. Came back all the way back, and then it had a bad overtime period. So everything is coalesced around this team. And no matter what the final verdict or how it's adjudicated, whether it's tonight, tomorrow, whatever day, I mean, this team's a threat to not only win it, but do some real damage.
Yeah, and they have some stuff to play for this week. Both Iowa and Michigan State are pegged right now as a number 6 seed in the NCAA tournament. So if Iowa were to win against Michigan State tonight, and the stat I pointed out in one of my pre-articles of the tournament was when Iowa played Michigan State, Lucy Olson and Sita Fulcher combined to go 5 for 23 from the floor. Mm-hmm. And that's not going to happen tonight. Yeah. I mean, they're both playing at such a different level. That was December 15th. And so, but anyway, if the winner of tonight's game will I would think absolutely cement at least a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament. And women's basketball, that's huge because you don't want to be, ideally you don't want to be a 7 or an 8 or a 9 or a 10 because you're going into a home court of probably a really good program. Right now, UConn is pegged as a 2 seed, for example. LSU is pegged as a 2 seed, for example. UConn actually has the best odds to win the national championship right now on sports books. And they would be a 2 seed. Do you want to go to Storrs, Connecticut? Or do you want to maybe go to, it's still going to be tough, but like Durham, North Carolina, right. Where it's a little bit more manageable. So a team you can maybe beat and get to the Sweet 16. Because I've said all along, Sweet 16 is like the legitimate ceiling for this team. Now you could make a run, the bracket could fall apart. You could pull a shocker, but realistic ceiling, Sweet 16 for me was always it. And I think they're in position now to at least do that. And now, why not have some fun here in the Big Ten tournament? They got to rest their starters last night. The revenge tour is set. Michigan State, Ohio State, UCLA, those would be their next 3, most likely. Lost to them all in games they'd love to have back. And that's kind of the beauty or frustration, I guess, of the current Big Ten schedule. You only get to play these teams once. Now you get that chance to revisit those games. So I like the path for Iowa for sure.
Absolutely. If they could get to a 6 seed and you look, just take it on the AP rankings because there'll be some adjustments, of course, when things cut there. But now LSU would be really interesting if you're going down to Baton Rouge for the for the first round. They're ranked number 9. They're probably more like a 2, but they're ranked 9th in the country. But Oklahoma, Kentucky, Duke, NC State, potentially TCU. I had some conversations and names. I said, it'd be kind of funny if they went to TCU and they knocked out Haley Van Lith for the 3rd straight year when she's with the 3rd different team. That would, and I would say that there's some Iowa State fans who even chuckled at that thought. But you have, but those are opponents that you look at with Iowa and go, there's no reason why they can't compete and win this game. Now they may not, they're on a foreign floor and things may not go your way and stuff like that happens. But as you said, you want to go to Storrs, Connecticut if they're a number 2 seed. Do you want to go to South Carolina is ranked 5th in the country? Do you want to go there right off the bat? Those are even to play UCLA. Let's say UCLA they don't get that far and then they play UCLA at a Pauley Pavilion. That's not going to be easy. The other ones aren't easy either, but you can be competitive. But more than all of that, Chad, more than whatever the final where they finish, whether they're in the Sweet 16 or the round of 32, or they win this tournament or they get beat on Friday, I think what we should look at big picture at this is a hell of a coaching job by Jan Jensen. And it's not just what their final record is. It's where they were sitting 2-6 in the Big Ten and had all of these frustrating results. And we're, analyzing this team and going, are there too many clicks? The player you spent the most on to bring in, it wasn't performing well, certainly in the clutch. You had all these holdovers who had different roles that haven't really filled into any bigger roles. And then you had a group of talented freshmen who are inconsistent like freshmen are, but you're wondering, are they clicks? Are they just not working together? What's the chemistry like? Is Jan in over her head because she's making the final decisions? And all of it changed. And Jan deserves all the flowers for this because I had people there's one guy who brought my tweet of mine from May when I said that she was the right decision to hire her. And this is the only decision, bring back my tweet and say, oh, was she really, okay. and I'm like, now I want to clap back, but now's
your chance. Here you go.
Yeah, I know. It's like, what do you think now, dude? This is, of course, this is the knee-jerk reactionary fan base that not fan base, I should say, certain fans that they do that whatever happens yesterday is the most important thing that happened. But I think Jan had a hell of a coaching job. She weathered a tough year, Chad, because when you're replacing the greatest player in the sports history and the greatest face in basketball history and the winningest coach in Big Ten history and 4 starters, Kate Martin is an all-time great. People, they have T-shirts about Molly Davis's headband and Gabby Marshall's eyes, light up the room, and you've got to replace all of that and plus what they brought on the floor. And yet here you are. You're in the NCAA tournament. You are a dangerous team. You are going forward and potentially and have a really good, strong chance to have a great tournament. She deserves everything she gets plus some because this has been a remarkable season.
Yeah, and just to close the women's conversation, I mean, some of this will be moot in 12 hours, but they could get to a 5. I mean, if they win tonight, I think they're in the conversation for a 5. Especially if they probably would have to beat Ohio State, but that would be even more appealing because it would kind of follow Caitlin's freshman year. That team surged all the way to the Big Ten championship game as a 6 seed, 11 seed here, but similar bracket situation. And they played their way from, kind of a 500 Big Ten team to a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament and got to a Sweet 16. Now, yes, they had Caitlin Clark, of course, but this team's playing really well, and they're playing. They've all got their roles. We've talked about that. I mean, Feuerbach had 6 assists, 3 steals last night. Falter 4-4 from the field, 9.7 rebounds, 18 minutes. I mean, just beautiful lines. If you just want people to accept their roles, do what they need to do, and then Lucy Olson is playing as good as she has all year. She was just unbelievable last night. So, in short time. So, anyway, good stuff on the Iowa women. We'll they're off next week, so I'm sure we'll have next week will be an interesting show, Scott. We'll see where the men's basketball team is.
Yeah,
we'll have a pretty good idea maybe where Iowa might be slotted for the women. It's going to be fun. It'll be interesting. I have no idea what our show next week is going to be like.
All I know is, Chad, we're going to have, this week it's High Tea Thursday with Game Day Men's Health. And so we got a lot going on there.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to our awesome partners at Game Day Men's Health. And I just want to say it again. It was so nice to see them out at the Iowa Everywhere party. What was that called again, Aiden? What was the party? Did the party have a name?
The Fan Appreciation Party.
Yes, and you were there. And you were, I appreciated Aiden for being there because I'm a fan of his. Yeah. But anyway, spring is coming. I know the weather doesn't say it's coming, but you want to be ready to attack the outdoors, attack life, attack your exercise, and Game Day Men's Health can truly help you out. They can make you feel like you're in your 20s again. They say that, and it's true. They do that with their testosterone replacement therapy treatments. They can also help you with healthy weight loss. It's a great time of year to just get your body in shape, your mentality in shape. Moving my tea into the high levels for me has had no side effects. I can't, I don't know how it is for everybody, but for me, it's been amazing. Only positive effects, just more energy, more positive mood. I mean, maybe you guys can tell, like I'm in a great mood. Performing athletically at a higher level. And honestly, you can feel the same, and it's super safe, super healthy. Get hooked up with Game Day Men's Health for a private, no obligation, free consultation. You can do that by hitting up GameDayMen'sHealth.com or visiting one of their locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, or North Liberty. Really, really, really appreciate Game Day Men's Health and sponsoring what we do so we can bring this podcast to you. And we thank our listeners who have reached out to them too and got involved. I mean, it's been kind of cool to see, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been great. I'm happy to go to my North Liberty location. And I wish I could have met with them. I think I was just getting back from New Orleans and before my venture to Indianapolis for almost 7 days for the combine, and I'll be back there again next week. I might as well just rent like an Airbnb for half a year the way things are going now. But Game Day Men's Health has been a godsend. As I mentioned, Chad, I'm down almost 40 pounds. And Game Day has a big impact on that. I feel much more energetic when I work out. And as anybody who does that knows, that the more you work out, the better you feel, the more you want to work out. It doesn't become a chore. It just becomes a part of your life. And Game Day Men's Health has been really helpful with that.
Yeah. And I guess I want to emphasize that part of it too. Like to really get it to work, you do have to kind of exercise, but you feel like you want to, like I would, I always feel like more energy to exercise than I had in the past. So very cool. Speaking of do you want to talk about Liddell Betts or Warren Ruggiero first? Because I think both topics are kind of interesting.
Well, I guess I could start with Liddell Betts because I was in Indianapolis all last week, as I just mentioned, for the NFL Combine, and wrote a lot of stories, a little bit with Iowa because I wrote Who's the Real Tight End You, and that became a debate a little bit. And but I didn't get a chance. I met with him at the Starbucks for a while. We just had a nice conversation, nothing really on record. And he kind of took me through the whole situation and how he ended up leaving. I guess I'll start by just saying that it happened incredibly fast. And he was sought after by multiple teams. The Giants is where he's going, but also the Bears were very, very interested in him. And there were a lot of people that were really looking at him. And why wouldn't you? You look at the growth that Iowa had in the running game with Caleb Johnson, with Kamari Moulton, and Jazz Patterson and others. And he's the reason. He's a really big factor in that. And plus, he had an NFL career, really good teacher. Well, he got it's funny. He got a call from the Giants right around Valentine's Day, I think it was. Yeah, it was Valentine's Day. And he and his wife were going out to dinner or something, and he thought they were going to ask him about Caleb Johnson. And it turns out, he didn't call him right away. He was going to wait and call, get what he got done. And then Brian Daboll calls him like a day later, the head coach. And he's like, oh, shoot, I forgot to call you guys back about that, and about Caleb and everything. He's like, it's not about Caleb, it's about you. And he's like, what? Really? And excuse me. And so he started talking, and the first thing that Liddell told me, and again, this was a conversation we had, and I wasn't reporting anything. He's just like, okay, I tell you what, you need to call Kirk and tell him about this first before we go any further, because I want to, I'm interested, sure, but let's do it this way. And hang on. And so Brian Daboll calls Kirk. Kirk calls him, tells him the Giants are interested. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to hear him out. And he goes, at this point, it's kind of difficult for him because he was already recruiting. He focused on the future at Iowa, likes where he is, has no problem with anything at Iowa at all. And so anyway, he hops on a Zoom with Brian Daboll, and everything's going really quick and really fast. I mean, you can tell that they're very, very interested in him. And Daboll's like, okay, at the end of it, we want to bring you out or we want to talk to you. And he goes, and so let's do it at the combine. He's like, okay, I'll do it at the combine. And then the week before the combine, Brian says, now why don't you just come out here? And so on the Saturday before the combine, so it'd been 2 days before it all became public, he flew out to Jersey, goes out there, and then has a great interview. They say they want to talk to one more person on Sunday before he heads back. And then, and by the way, through the entire process, he told me, I talked to Kirk throughout it. I told him what they had told him. Kirk's like, yeah, they're very interesting. Because he didn't know if it was just like he was just part of the interview process. It's like, oh, they're reaching out to a bunch of people and talking to me. He's like, no, they want you. And so he goes out there. Brian's like, Daboll's like, okay, I've got one more person I want to talk to, and then I'll get back to you. He's like, okay. But by the time he was before he was even seated and the door was closed in the airplane, Daboll calls and says, we want to hire you. And he's like, I'm very interested. I need to go home and talk to my wife. And so he makes it back to Iowa, talks to her, and then Kirk, and he said it was tough. There's no hard feelings whatsoever. I mean, Kirk totally gets it. And, and by that later that night, he accepted the job, and then he was off to the combine the next day. It was kind of funny because when I met him, I think it was Friday at the combine, he was wearing a navy blue sweatshirt. He's like, I don't even have any Giants material. And so he came there and he even mentioned it to Daboll. He's like, I don't have a Giants sweatshirt. I don't have a Giants jacket. It's just wear something blue. So, and the Friday I talked to him was kind of in a mid section before he had to meet. He had a bunch of informals that night with different running backs, and he had a formal with Caleb Johnson. And which Caleb described as awkward for him.
That's funny. Yeah. Wow.
So he's in there sitting next to, because they have 15-minute formal interviews, and it's speed dating, and he's just going through the this tape, and it's like they've been going through that tape all year, so but I think this was certainly something that was possible. Liddell's a great coach. He's proved it. He's got a lot of experience. He was an NFL running back, and he did it in a lot of ways. And Iowa has an advocate for them at the next level. And now, there are 3 former Iowa players who are with the New York Giants, 2 Ferences and him. So this is it's a kind of an interesting development.
Oh yeah, great stuff there, Scott. Man, we're so lucky I feel like we have a really good partnership here. You have all the great Big Ten stories and all that. You get some good, a great conversation there with Liddell. Did he say anything about, some people think Daboll is probably, on the hot seat here. So did he share any concerns about potentially, the Giants having a coaching staff change a year from now, or just wants to get the NFL, or what?
Not really. I think, he had his eyes a little bit on the NFL, but it wasn't like it was it's probably like if somebody came to one of us and offered us double our salary. It's not that we're at least the way I feel is like, well, it's not like I want to move anywhere, but if somebody's going to throw more money at you and, you're going to go and plus it's a higher level of competition. He didn't really say, as far as it comes to the Giants, I mean, the NFL is so cutthroat that it could happen for anybody. I mean, like look at like the Eagles with Nick Sirianni, 3 years ago, I guess now they were in the Super Bowl, they lose. Then they have a really bad season, end of the season. Half the staff gets fired. And then they go and they win the Super Bowl the next year. So the NFL is very transient that way. I mean, he's trying to figure out things like, okay, the kids and his wife are going to live in Iowa for the rest of the year. Then they're going to go to New Jersey. And he's trying to figure out living situations. So there's a lot there. But we did talk a little bit about the players that are here at Iowa. And he is really, really high on Kamari Moulton. He's up to like 205 now. And he goes, it's good weight. He looks the part. He's going to be the next big thing here. And you think about it with him and how he's recruited. I mean, his first recruit was Caleb. He lost him to Cal, brought him and then coaxed him back. Kamari Moulton was going to go to FAU. He was going to go to Florida Atlantic and he brought him out of that. Jazz Patterson was kind of a guy and, ended up, has been a pretty good player. And then there are others that they really like too. And one other thing that I'll bring up, and this is kind of it's related, but not the same, is a couple of years ago when they were after Tyler Goodson left and they kind of had a hole at running back. Kirk actually came to him and brought up, hey, do we need to go to the portal at this position? And so he said it was totally instigated by Kirk. Initiated by Kirk to go to the portal, as opposed to him saying, man, we just need to get somebody, which the most assistants would do. And he was the one that said, I think when we're bringing in Jazz and Caleb, I think Caleb will be a guy for us we can play right away. And they also had LaShawn Williams, and I'm trying to remember the other one. But so he thought that they had enough to work with, that they didn't need to go out and get anybody. And he was proven right by it. And that was in 2022. So to me, it shows a couple of things. One is he's confident in his development. He's confident in the players that he brings in. But also that Kirk Ferentz is, what people sometimes don't appreciate is he is willing to go out and do that. He is willing to go out and get players if necessary. So I think that's that was just kind of a little anecdote that I wanted to share.
Yeah, they had Gavin Williams that year
Gavin
too.
Williams,
obviously, he ends up transferring. But really good stuff there, Scott. I do expect the running backs coach opening to get filled pretty soon. Sounds like they've got some interviews going already. So I think that'll be buttoned up before. We wondered kind of how long it would linger, but I think it will probably be buttoned up before spring ball opens late this month. But speaking of, Scott, the Hawkeyes do have a new offensive coach on staff, an analyst, Warren Ruggiero, 11-year offensive coordinator at Wake Forest. Man, I think this is a home run hire. Dug into it a little bit more, and he and Tim Lester both were young OCs in the ACC back in the mid-teens, both with programs that had very little to work with at the time in terms of offensive talent. And so I think they kind of bonded in that way. You know how if you're a coach at school X in whatever conference and another coach at school Y in the same conference, and you're going to talk shop. And Tim Lester, I mean, he's just such an affable guy. He'll talk to anybody. He just wants to talk ball. And so I think that's kind of how their relationship began. Syracuse versus Wake Forest a couple years. And then, of course, Tim goes to Purdue, then Western Michigan. They go their own ways. But Warren Ruggiero ends up with quite the resume at Wake Forest. And I find this to be a really fascinating, good hire, especially when you bring in 4 or 5. You got 5 quarterbacks this spring. I mean, Gronowski obviously, not going to be full go, but you've got Gronowski, you got Sullivan, you got Hank Brown, you got Shaggy, Jackson Stratton, and of course Jimmy Sullivan, the true freshman. So this guy's a quarterbacks coach, just like Lester. I feel like it gives Lester more time to coordinate the offense. Ruggiero is, just look at the 2021 season for Wake Forest, and you'll see, what is possible. It turned a program with no talent into one that scored 41 points a game that year. With Dave Clawson as the head coach, kind of had a long-term partnership there, and Clawson hung it up in December. And Ruggiero didn't have a home when they brought in the new coach from Washington State, right? So, it's almost like a John Budmeyer hire where he's available, but he's a way more accomplished guy that you're getting as an analyst. And, he's a passing game guy too, Scott, RPO guy. So it's really interesting to me. What do you make of the hire?
Oh, yeah, it's a brilliant hire for Iowa in that position. I mean, they advertised it. They went the full 9 yards on this, which was they put it out there. I think it was in December and fully advertised it. And generally, what you get in today's world is somebody who lost their job. Got in his case, it was just more of a coaching change than it was an actual change of needing a new different coach. But I think what it signifies here is you've got somebody who is a very bright person at that position. Maybe he's only here for a year, but it's a senior analyst position that they advertised for. So they were, they're going to pay more, and they're going to bring in a guy who has this kind of experience. And as you said, Chad, you look at what he was able to, they won 11 games in 2021. This is Wake Forest. This isn't just, even in the ACC, there's still some pretty good teams. And for the most part, other than what, I think they went to the, ACC championship game that year. They were really good. But I think more than anything is that out of this position, now that they can have actual on-field, working, they can work with players on field, that it brings that extra level, that extra set of eyes. And you think back just a couple of years ago, what Brian Ferentz wouldn't have given to have John Budmeyer work with the quarterbacks, while he was doing this, that maybe he'd still be there, right? No, I'm just kidding. But no, I think with, what it does is it brings two minds together to look at things and analyze things differently. And you have a new accomplished quarterback that when he's healthy will be available to do a lot of good things. You have a guy I thought that made a lot of progress last year in Tim Lester. And then you have another guy who has an extensive background in coordinating offenses and scoring points. And the slow mesh game is always fascinating to me because initially I don't like it at all. Yeah. But if it works, it works. Yeah. So
do you think that they'll bring some of that in? Because that's not really something that Lester did, but he also had Cade last year as his quarterback. So,
yeah.
I think Gronowski could run the slow mesh more.
For sure.
Yeah, he kind of did that almost at South Dakota State. But anyway, what do you think about that too?
I think that's something that they can run. I don't think it's something that they'll live in. I think it's something that they can do once in a while. It's like if you want to change the tempo, that alters everything. And all of a sudden you go to a slow mesh, even just for a couple of plays, then the defense is on their heels a little bit. Like, how do we defend this? This is just different. You're just basically getting in the way. And of course, it's so anti-Iowa blocking scheme that's going to be really interesting to see how they marry
non-starter for Kirk.
But he is more open to this. And I would say that if you do that and you see an opening, because they're flat-footed in the second level, or hey, there's a slant route that's wide open. That's what you usually want to throw is some sort of middle in between the hashes route. If it works, it works. So, and even so, even if it doesn't happen that way, it's just another element you can play with. And when you have two guys who aren't going to be on the road recruiting, then you have time to tinker. You have time to look and time to analyze. And so I think it's great. I think it's a really smart hire for Iowa. Who knows if it's going to be more than 1 year, because somebody will, there's going to be the jobs. But then again, Kirk will be 70 this year. You don't know how much longer he's going to have either. So you just take it year by year, and this is a really smart and calculated move for this year. Chad, you looked into it a lot more than I did because I was kind of juggling a bunch of stuff this week. Sure. What did you think of the move?
Yeah, it's to me, it's the type of guy that Ferentz is going to love because he made it at places where it's tough to make it. You just look at his resume, just going all the way back. He's been at Bowling Green, Elon. Like, he's been at places where, you don't expect to win. And he built Wake Forest into, a juggernaut offense for a stretch there. I mean, Sam Hartman was kind of their famous quarterback back in 2021, but there's some crazy stats out there. The 41 points per game in 2021 was 43rd in modern FBS history and fourth most in ACC history. I mean, they averaged 30 points per game at least every year from 2017 to 2022. The only team in the ACC to do that, Scott. That includes Clemson, includes Florida State. So this is a guy that found ways with what he had to put up points. And yes, it's Tim Lester's system still, but he obviously is a smart coach that's going to be able to coach his players to thinking the right way about offense. And I think that's also been, this show is, we don't need to keep, throwing dirt on Brian Ferentz's coaching grave here, but that was just something that was just not part of it. It wasn't like, let's figure out something new that can work with the guy. It was like, we're going to do what we're going to do. And, we're going to run. I don't care if they're stacking the box. We got to run into it. Like, that was kind of the mentality instead of, you look at just what you talk about, the slow mesh. The idea is you don't want to run into a bad box, and you don't want to throw into a pass coverage that's dropping 8, So
exactly.
That's the whole point, is to run into friendly boxes and pass into friendly secondaries. Like, that's the idea. And I think Caleb wouldn't have been as good of a fit, I don't think, because he was more of a, patience type of thing. Obviously he got outside well, hit the holes when he needed to, but he wasn't a fast hitting guy. I think Moulton and Jazz Patterson in particular really hit the hole. I mean, you could go from boom to boom with those guys in a hurry. And so I think those guys could actually work with the slow mesh if they use it. But I just think it's intriguing. I think it just shows that Tim Lester figured out the run last year, Scott. I know we got to close, Aiden. We're going to close. And they're determined. He really wants to fix the pass, and they're no stone is unturned here. That's what this hire tells me, that they are going to become a passing team here at some point. And I think they want to become a passing team this year, or at least maybe not a pass first, but hey, we can pass the ball. And so I'm real excited to see what they can do this year. And they just got a wide receiver commitment yesterday too. So, I think it's just intriguing, and we love intriguing here in our business. We, not trying to sell false hope here, but it's just a smart move. And it just tells me that Lester is continues to be the right guy, because they're doing the right things with him in charge.
They averaged 6 yards a play that year, more than 6 yards a play in 2021. That is an unbelievable stat. The other thing that I really like about this, and this is something that Tim Lester has brought that Brian didn't, is that it allows for versatility among your backfield players. And, one that, I guess I remember some of the conversation with Liddell was Tyrone Tracy. First of all, he's like, he was kind of the one that helped. In some ways, they asked him about him because he was only there a year and he was a wide receiver, but, really liked Liddell. But if Tyrone Tracy was played in a different way, to utilize all of his strengths, because he only ran for 1,000 yards in the NFL as a rookie this year. But instead, he was an ex-receiver at Iowa, which means he's got press coverage off the line of scrimmage, and he's not that tall. That was just, it's like, what are you thinking trying to do this? If he would have played like TJ Washington, who Liddell is very, very high on, thinks TJ will be an outstanding player. If you're able to move him around, if you could have done that with Tyrone, that would have been great. I think that's what both Tim and Warren will be able to do here with their players, is put them in better positions to make plays. And if you can do all of that, have an extra set of eyes, looking ahead, in the fall, if he can analyze upcoming opponents better and scout them better and find ways to win, then, again, not going to sell false hope, but I'm pretty high on Iowa. I think Iowa could be very competitive, even with a challenging schedule. And if you have these kinds of eyes, if you have a veteran quarterback, you have a good receivers, certainly, the guts of a very good offensive line coming back. There's no reason why they can't be very competitive. And I think this is just a smart, calculated hire. Some schools are going out and hiring a ton of assistant outside linebackers coaches, Illinois being among them. And I sat with Brett for a couple hours and talked about stuff like that. But, they've got like 20 assistants now. Iowa's not going to go that route, but it's calculated. It's smart. And I think this is going to be very efficient as well.
All right, great show, Scott. When we hit everything we wanted to hit. Live, it's fun to have a live show again.
Yeah.
Aiden, thanks for setting it up. What do we got? 2 guys next at 8:30, right? Is that correct?
Yep, coming up here in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, you got to run. All right. We'll talk to you next Thursday from the Channel Seed Studios and only on the Iowa Everywhere Network.